Whether you won or lost in week 2, today is a day where you can improve your fantasy football team via the waiver wire. I'm going to have something for all types of leagues, small and large leagues, over 15 names we'll talk about today, as well as defensive streamers for week 3 so you can plan ahead. Okay, let's start with names that should already be rostered. In all of my 12-team leagues, all these names are not available, but if you're out there in an 8 or a 10-team league, these guys, they should take priority over any other name that I talk about today, right? Every single one of these names should already be rostered. Bashul Tutin, if for some reason he's still out there and available, for example, ESPN, he's available in over 50% of leagues. Yahoo, over 45% of leagues, he's still available. He should be your number one priority if he is still out there on the waiver wire. He got a lot more work after that Bigsby trade here in week 2, over 25% of the snaps, 10 total touches to 17 for Etienne. The good news for him, he touched the ball over 55% of the time he was on the field. Allen Jr. is not a threat to his touches. He looked incredible. The bad news is, for now, Etienne's clearly the guy, but there could be some standalone value for Tutin. All right, let's jump into ads for any other type of formats, your bigger formats. Let's start off with Troy Franklin, available in over 90% of formats everywhere. Okay, so you can't sit here and tell me, oh, he's not available in my league. Well, 90% of formats he's available. I'm willing to spend about 15 to 20% of my fab. We'll talk about it, but Troy Franklin was featured on our stash video before week number 2. We do a weekly stash video on this channel. So make sure you're subscribed and you're beating the waiver wire because we're helping you do that every week. But last week we saw a lot of great signs to stash Troy Franklin. And this week he led all receivers in snaps, 83%, routes run, targets with 9. He had a 32.1% target share with Bo Nix. Not only did he lead the team in snap share, but it was also his career high. He had never seen this high percentage of snaps in any single game in his entire career. But that involvement also led to a team high in production, right? 24 total fantasy points, 23 of that coming through the air. He had 9 targets, caught 8 of them for 89 yards, as well as a receiving touchdown. And in case you guys may have forgotten, Bo Nix and Troy Franklin, they were teammates at Oregon in college. And at college, at Oregon, Franklin put up 2,274 receiving yards and 23 touchdowns in their 2 years together. They have this mind meld, Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. Franklin has kind of finally caught up to the NFL. This could, keyword could, this could be the next great breakout. There's no guarantees. That's why players are on the waiver wire. However, you do need to buy a ticket to ride the train, all right? That's how the waiver wire works. You have to assume some risk to get some reward. So I'm willing to spend about 15 to 20% of my fab to go out there and get a Troy Franklin. At 1B, we have Alec A.O. Manor. Now, I'm not just hyping myself up, okay? We get plenty of things wrong on the channel, but this is another player that was featured on our stash video the last week before week number 2. Don't miss that stash video. Make sure you're subscribed. You've got your notifications on. But in back-to-back weeks, Alec looks like a crucial part of this Tennessee Titans offense. In week number 2, he was second on the team in snaps with 73% of the snaps, second on the team in routes run. He tied Calvin Ridley for first in targets with 6. That's a 20% target share. Back-to-back weeks over a 20% target share, by the way, and that involvement led to some real fantasy relevant moments. For example, if anybody remembers this play, Cam Ward rolling out to the right, throws all the way across his body. You should never do that. They always teach you not to do that. But Alec A.O. Manor, the broken play touchdown, he comes down with it, looks like an incredibly reliable player for this team that might lead to reliable fantasy outputs. In week number 2, 15.6 fantasy points, 56 yards, the touchdown. And as Cam Ward gets more comfortable in the NFL, and as this offense improves, Alec could turn into a weekly fantasy play. So again, another guy that, you have to buy the ticket to ride the train, 15 to 20% fab on Alec A.O. Manor. So after these top names, right, if all these other guys are not available, the question for me then becomes, what do you need? Because I don't think that this is a week on the waiver wire in general where you're going hard. Like, assuming none of the guys we talked about at the beginning of the video are available, none of these guys you're spending 50% of your fab or, you're unloading the clip for at this point, right? But what do you need at this point? I have 3 players tied at 3 different positions. So if you need tight end, and for some reason Juwan Johnson is still out there, because he's still out there in over 50% of leagues for ESPN and Yahoo, then go grab Juwan Johnson. This is back-to-back weeks of reliable production and usage. He played 95% of the snaps, 68 snaps, had 9 targets, almost a 27% target share. this is 2 weeks in a row where Juwan Johnson has played 95+% of the snaps, has had 9 or more targets, and has had 15 or more fantasy points. Juwan Johnson is a featured weapon in the Kellen Moore-led Saints offense. Now, do you need a quarterback? Because if you need a quarterback, then my third priority will probably be Daniel Jones. I know that sounds crazy, but it's probably time to take Daniel Jones serious with the Indianapolis Colts. I'm willing to spend about 10 to 15% of my fab if you're desperate. We'll talk about what that looks like in a second. And week number 1, Daniel Jones, he dominated the Dolphins, right? Almost 30 fantasy points, no turnovers, 3 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground. That was difficult to trust because Miami just looked like the worst team in the NFL in week number 1. However, in week 2, he had a much more difficult task at hand, the Denver defense, and he still had an incredible game. Another game with multiple touchdowns, no turnovers, and his role on the goal line is incredibly exciting. If it continues, he could be a money play each and every week. He's had 3 touchdowns on the ground in 2 weeks, and when it's like first and goal, third and goal, whatever, but it's a short yardage situation, they are willing to do the tush push. They're willing to give Daniel Jones the quarterback sneaks. Jonathan Taylor owners know this way too well, but he has already vultured a couple touchdowns on the goal line. And if he continues to be that weapon for them, the push and the tush push, he could have plenty of value. And for those of you who lost Joe Burrow, this is probably your best waiver wire option at the quarterback spot. I can't speak for everyone, but for most people, it's probably the best available. Joe Burrow, grade 3 turf toe. He's going to be out potentially 3 months right now. So look towards Daniel Jones. All right, if you need a wide receiver, here's my third tied player at this position, or at this point in the waiver wire video, Cedric Tillman. He is breaking out again. 10 to 15% of our fab we're looking to spend on Cedric Tillman. Last year from week 7 to 11 with Jameis Winston, before the concussion, we had Cedric Tillman on the right side of your screen averaging 18.6 points per game, over 90% of the snaps, over 10 targets per game, over 75 receiving yards per game. So what is happening this year through the first 2 weeks? I don't think we should view that as a fluke, right? This is some legitimate production that we've already seen from a player in previous seasons. In week 2, Tillman led the wide receiver room in snaps, almost 95% of the snaps, in routes run, and in targets, he was second right behind Jeudy. He had a 17% target share. I mean, remember guys, Jerry Jeudy was a 6th or a 7th round pick, depending on your fantasy league. And as of right now, 2 weeks in, Tillman is outproducing him. He had 10.2 PPR points this week, only caught 2 of his targets for 22 yards. The touchdown was a little bit of a fluke. I hear you, but he is totally a reliable option in your flex at this point and should be looked at in any sort of like start 8, start 9 type of formats. All right, if you need a running back, let's be honest with each other. Look me in the eyes. If you need a running back, the waiver wire is probably not going to be your friend if you're in any 10, 12 team, 14 team type of league. However, I do think we should talk about this player. I have low expectations, but he's higher on my list this week because of the scarcity at running back. That is Jeremy McNichols. Now, you've probably put 2 and 2 together. Again, I don't have high expectations, but Austin Eckler tore his ACL on Thursday night, so he's going to be out for the entire season for the Washington Commanders. And again, I don't have high expectations for McNichols. I'm not sitting here telling you, oh, this is such an exciting pickup. He could win you your fantasy league. He's a league winner. No, he's not, but he's going to have a role. And it is hard to find running backs with serious roles on the waiver wire right now. Bill Krosky-Merritt will be the early down back, the first and second down guy, probably the goal line guy, especially when they're up in games, they're going to use him. However, Jeremy McNichols will be their satellite back, 2-minute drill type of guy, a running back that they'll utilize through the air. When Eckler went down on Thursday night, the Commanders were down multiple scores to the Packers. And then Jeremy McNichols came in and pretty much played the majority of the snaps until the end of the game. However, again, that was because the Commanders were down in the game. Had the Commanders been up, you would have seen a lot more Bill Krosky-Merritt. However, keep in mind, the Commanders are probably not going to be in many negative game scripts this year because they are a very good offense. They just faced an elite defense. Again, I know I'm not selling this to you, but I want to be realistic. Jeremy McNichols is probably the most available, running back on the waiver wire, but he's a flexible name. He's not going to win you your league. Let's talk about our 7th pickup, Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm willing to spend about 10% of my fab. He's available in most leagues. Now, why is Wan'Dale not higher in my waiver rankings, you might ask? Well, this is a player who we have seen consistently in and out of the fantasy waiver wire every single year since he's entered the league. All right. This is not some rookie that I think is going to break out that has like untapped potential. In my opinion, we're looking at a low floor player, has always had a low yards per route run. You look throughout his career, 1.36, 1.25, 1.48. He's always had a low yards per route run. He's not had many high value targets where he's targeted deep down the field. He's typically a dink and dunk type of player. In PPR, he can be a, PPR, merchant, if you will. But he's just not someone that's going to give you many high volume, high value targets, rather. I know this week he was fantastic. He had 142 yards, almost 18 yards per catch. Ridiculous. I'm just betting against that being the likelihood of, the rest of his year. I am betting on that being an outlier. Okay. I don't think he's going to continue that for the rest of the season. At 9, let's talk about Zach Ertz. If you don't have a startable tight end, Ertz is a perfect fill-in. Back-to-back weeks with a touchdown, back-to-back weeks over 11 PPR points. That's a dream for a tight end right now if you don't have a tight end you can rely on. I mean, with Austin Eckler also off this team, we might see more dump-offs to your tight ends like your Zach Ertz. On Thursday Night Football, Ertz was second on the team in snaps with 90%, right behind Debo for routes run, and tied Debo for second in targets with 7 and 18% target share. At number 9, Romeo Doubs. I'm willing to spend anywhere from 1 to 8% of my fab. If no one in your league needs wide receiver, maybe, try and make it a free bid. But Jaden Reed will be out 6 to 8 weeks with the fractured collarbone. It might be longer than that. You might be asking, why are you not higher on Romeo Doubs then? Well, Doubs on Thursday, 3 catches, 28 yards, and a touchdown. But touchdowns are not a sticky stat. It is very difficult to rely on a touchdown each and every single week. So he had a good week, but keep in mind, this defense in Green Bay is elite, which keeps putting the Packers in game scripts where they do not need to throw the ball. And if they continually are in those type of scenarios, it's going to be a Russian roulette in that wide receiver room. And I'm just not sure I want to invest in that. I certainly don't want to spend a high amount of my fab to invest in that. It could be 1 week Matthew Golden breaks out. We could see Dontavion Wicks and Romeo Doubs. It's just, this is not a team that needs to throw the ball much. So volume's already at a premium, and the defense is just so good. At number 10, sneaky ad here, Hunter Renfrow. He's going to be available in most of your leagues. All right, you can spend anywhere from 1 to 5% of your fab. You can be more aggressive if you're in a 14, 16 team league. Yesterday, he was second on the team in snaps at 81%. He was second on the team in routes run and tied for second with targets at 9. He tied T-Mac McMillan with 9 targets. He was heavily targeted in the red zone as well. He had 3 total end zone targets and 2 total touchdowns, finishing with just under 24 fantasy points. Could this be the next Adam Thielen? I don't know, but I think it's worth adding as a speculative ad at this point on the waiver wire. At number 11, this is specifically if you're in a super flex league. I'm talking to my super flex people. If you're in a 1 quarterback league, you don't pick up Jake Browning. But in super flex, you pick up Jake Browning, and I think you can dump half your fab. Because if Joe Burrow is truly going to be out 3 months, and you've got a quarterback that's going to be thrown to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, Mike Gesicki, plenty of great weapons, then Jake Browning, if you went late quarterback in Superflex or you had Joe Burrow, he could be a reliable starter each and every week in a high-powered offense. Of course, he's not going to be Joe Burrow, but in Superflex leagues, this is one of those scenarios where I think you can unload half your clip and guarantee a starter each and every week. At 12, this is very sneaky. I imagine we'll talk about him in our stash video, but Isaiah Likely. He's available in the vast majority of leagues. Spend anywhere from 1 to 5% of your fab. Not a lot of people are going to be thinking about Isaiah Likely, in my opinion. Mark Andrews looks washed. He looks potentially washed at this point, all right? They're not prioritizing him with targets, and I just don't know if they ever are going to. I think Likely might have a bigger role than we are anticipating, so I think he's worth a stash, especially if you don't have a tight end that you love. Okay, if you're looking to pick up defenses for week 3, here are my favorite streamers. The Falcons at the Panthers. We've seen how bad the Panthers are this year. That one makes sense. The Packers at the Browns. Should the Packers be on your waiver wire? They shouldn't be. Go pick them up. The Bucks versus the Jets with no Justin Fields. The Chiefs at the Giants. I know the Giants threw all over the Cowboys. That's because the Cowboys defense is absolute ass. Okay, respectfully. All right, here are some deep league stashes. If you're in a 16, anything bigger than that type of team league, here are some deep league stashes you can potentially add, like Torrey Horton, who caught a touchdown this week for the Seahawks. How long will Cooper Kupp be a thing? Blake Corum is a clear backup to Kyron Williams. Tyquan Thornton is a good, best ball option, I guess, DeAndre Hopkins keeps getting touchdowns, so he's worth stashing. Chris Rodriguez. Could Chris Rodriguez have a role in Washington? I don't think so. There's people out there who think he'll have a goal line work. I mean, they probably wouldn't have made him inactive if they wanted to use him over Bill Krosky, but sure, he's worth a stash. Jatavion Sanders had 10 targets with the Panthers this week, so another stash in deeper formats. Guys, I appreciate you so much watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. If you found any value in this video whatsoever, then go ahead and show me some love. Hey, just so you guys know, news is constantly changing. We know that. But if you want my latest up-to-date rankings, you can get a 2025 season pass. It's a one-time purchase, $34. You get access to the site for the entire season. That's about $2 per week for the rest of the season. My latest rankings rest of season, my weekly rankings, some vouchers to come on the live stream and ask us questions. You'll get access to all of that. But I appreciate y'all watching the video. Again, hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this offseason on the FastDraft app, where there are over $250,000 in prizes waiting to be won. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That is 10 free drafts on us. And when you finish your first real money contest, I'll send you my 2025 rookie report and season rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.